When I was in college for teaching, the amount of lesson planning they had us do was a lot. But did I have an hour to 2 hours to lesson plan for one lesson every single time? No. Especially if you are teaching more than one subject, you do not have time to sit down and lesson plan for an hour to 2 hours. So today I have a lesson plan that I am going to walk you through as if you were a coworker and kind of just discuss my thought process while I lesson plan. So this lesson plan can be done for any subject really. And the nice thing about this is my admin also liked how this lesson plan was written up. So the good news is you do it once, and then if you always want to review the lesson and have your students do it again, it's already written up. So I like to handwrite my lessons, but you don't have to. You can always just use this as a basic guide, and you can always type up your lessons if you choose. So when I lesson plan, my goal is my first couple years to have this in front of me, right? So anytime I am teaching a lesson, I have my binder and my lesson plan. There's a lot that goes on while you're teaching, and you are going to forget certain things. So it's important that you have some type of guide there. I used to, my first year teaching, I used to have like a step-by-step exactly how I was going to say something and how I was going to respond. The best advice I got from a veteran teacher as far as that went was to always ensure things are consistent. Consistency teaches our students we have expectations and they know what to expect. So that's why I try to keep things as consistent as possible. So the first thing I'm going to do is obviously write what skill my students are going to be learning. So let's pretend that I am going to be teaching theme. So I'm going to write the skill as theme. And then as always on the side, you can put the standard if your state teaches standard. Again, admin always likes to see the standard we are teaching. And then you will also notice I have differentiation. So I'm going to cover that a little bit after I've been lesson planning, so that way you can kind of see how I go about doing that. Objective. So we want to have a goal. Now there's lots of jokes regarding objectives, but it is nice for students to know what the main goal of the lesson is. That way we know what we're learning. So I like to do I can statements, and then I had my students read them. So I can determine and discuss theme. Now, you can always have I can determine and discuss theme in a story, in a text, however you want to write it out. But basically, that's what I want my students to learn. Next, what lesson is it? So let's pretend I'm in Unit 2, Lesson 5. That way, when I go to actually teach it, I know exactly where it is at. Okay, materials. Materials are really important. That way, if you have your lesson plan already written out, you can just know, okay, these are my materials. And that way, when the lesson comes up, you're ready to have it out and teach. So materials. So I always like to have an anchor chart. I'm also going to write anchor chart for differentiation because visuals are really important when we're teaching. So that is something I am making sure all my learners have is an anchor chart. Now, if I am teaching theme, if I teach any reading skill, I like to have a graphic organizer. So that's another material. I need to have a graphic organizer. And guess what? That is also another way I can differentiate. So graphic organizer. Okay, and then I need to make sure that I am teaching theme using text. So if you've watched any of my other videos on how to teach reading skills, I always use a small picture book to teach the skill. So I'm going to have a picture book, and that also goes with visuals. Then when my students come together to practice the skill, they also need a text, so practice text. And then lastly, even though it has it right next to it, I need to have my formative assessment. Then for my formative assessment, I like to use a graphic organizer, what I've taught the whole lesson doing. So that's what my formative assessment is going to be, is them showing me using the graphic organizer that they can find theme. Okay, so now let's talk about my thought process as far as getting ready to teach a lesson. So before I teach a lesson, I like to bring up background knowledge. There's lots of studies about background knowledge and new knowledge and how they connect. So I'm going to ask my students, what do we already know about theme? So before my lesson, I need to bring up background knowledge. Now, if you're a new teacher, it might be a good idea to write the specific question you are going to ask. I just write background knowledge because I have an idea of how I'm going to ask that, but again, it's up to you. Then I might have students think, pair, share. Think, pair, share. I'm just going to put TPS, think, pair, share. So I'm going to make them think about what they already know about theme. I'm going to have them share with a partner and then share with the whole class. Then before the lesson, now I'm going to say, okay, this is what theme is. Theme is the overall message or what the character learned in a story. So now I need to tell my students what theme is. Okay, and then I'm going to also show an anchor chart. So during my presentation of the anchor chart, I am explaining again what theme is. The nice thing I also did was they had reading journals. So within the reading journal, they also would draw out the anchor chart. They don't have to draw out the whole thing, but some type of visual so they understand what theme is. So they are also going to write in their reading journals. Now on Teacher Pay Teachers, there's hundreds of resources of downloading flap charts, and however you want to do it, however creative you want to be, that's up to you. But I want to do something in their reading journals. Okay, so at this point I had brought up background knowledge. I had showed them my anchor chart. We talked about it in a reading journal. For me, I used a program called FlowCab, and one year we got a new admin in, and he was asking, what programs do you want to use? And a lot of teachers didn't use FlowCab, but I fought for that program. Your parent-teacher committee as well, they should have extra funding. So there were times I would put in for, like, if I was doing a science experiment, that they helped with funding. So there's lots of ways you can get different programs, but I personally love Flowcabulary. It was one of my things that I used. I one year had 5 ESL students, English as a second language learners, and I had 3 of them that were exited from the program. And I truly believe it was from FlowCab. So I always have FlowCab. So another way you could do FlowCab before the lesson is now you're like, okay, I explained theme, here's my anchor chart, let's watch the FlowCab. So I watched the FlowCab with my students, we talk about it, I may have them watch it a second time. Then on their whiteboards, okay, they go through and they write what they learned about theme from the FlowCab. Then I make them physically get up and walk around, and then I stop a timer and they share with a partner. So another way to have a formative assessment, I'm going to go back and write whiteboards. So while I am having them write what they learned from theme, this is my formative assessment that Joey and Susie still just are really confused about theme, okay? So now that I have my before lesson done, I'm going to now move into how am I actually going to teach theme, and that's going to be modeling. So during my lesson, I'm going to be modeling how to find theme by thinking out loud. When I think out loud, I am also differentiating the lesson for my learners. So think out loud. This was really a big when I went to college. So as I am reading my picture book, I'm also connecting it to theme. So I actually have a whole video on me presenting how to learn theme using a picture book on my channel if you're interested. So after I have modeled and thought out loud, I'm going then to model how to fill out the graphic organizer. So model graphic organizer is how I'm going to teach theme. So I've already taught it, I've modeled it, and now they have their graphic organizer. I can get ready for my students to practice the skill. So when I have my students practice this skill, before I even get started with their independent work with a partner, teacher table, or independently, I always have them rate their learning on a scale 1 to 3. One year I did 1 to 4, and it was too much. As simple as you can get, okay? So 1, I need to work at the teacher table. 2, I need to work with a partner or the teacher table. Maybe they just need another example. Or 3, I can work independently. So I had them write 1 or 3 on their whiteboards, and then sometimes I make them physically get up and move around the room. So my 1s will stand at the teacher table, my 2s will stand in a corner, and 3 will stand in another corner. I taught in a trailer, it wasn't very big, so I tried the best I could. Your 2s can work together. Your 2s can work with a 3. You can ask, does any 3s want to work with a 2? Because if they're a 3, they can teach it as well. That's up to them. Even if partners are both a 2, it doesn't mean they can't work together and help each other. Because that activity of them working together is for them to practice. It's not for them to somehow already get it done and learn it all. So now that my setup is ready, I'm going to jump into my small group. So during the lesson, they are now filling out the graphic organizer. So again, they'll need a text to fill out the graphic organizer to find theme. My best advice, again, is on Teacher Pay Teachers. There's lots of different small texts on how to find theme. So if I'm doing small group, that's why I have small group in my lesson plan. I am now going to purposely plan how to plan out small group. I want the same text as the rest of my class because we're going to come back and review it. So I need just a short text. I want within 10 to 20 minutes for my students to practice theme and get through that whole entire graphic organizer. Sometimes you're going to have students who do not finish, but I want to make sure that I give them enough time so they can get pretty close. So for my small group, I'm using the same short text and the same graphic organizer. My small group is now at the teacher table, and my job is to decide how can I get my students to understand theme. So first, we are sitting at the teacher table with our reading journals. Let's go over what theme means again, okay? And then I like to review quickly my teacher model with my small group. So I'm going to say, okay, here's my anchor chart. And remember when I was modeling the story, I found theme by asking, what did my character learn? What was the problem in the story? How did my character solve that problem? Okay, so I'm reviewing again what theme is with my small group. Once I'm done reviewing, we are going to jump into the text. Okay, so we're going to read the text together. This is up to you as a teacher. There's a lot of research on different ways to do it. You do with what you feel comfortable. Sometimes I had my students read it together. Sometimes I'd read through it and think out loud. Really, as long as you're practicing theme, I wouldn't worry too much about how exactly you're doing small group every single day. So we're going to read the text together, and then after that, we're going to fill out the graphic organizer together. So let's say the question on the graphic organizer is, who is the main character? So I'm going to tell them they should know that skill. You guys fill out these two parts together as a small group, okay? At this time, so I'm going to go back to my during. I am checking in with my students who are not at the teacher table. And I've already had my graphic organizer filled out from the text, so I know what the answer is supposed to be. But theme is very subjective. So as long as they have evidence to support the theme, there could be many different themes. So I went around the room and I found that there was different versions of theme. So I might write on my paper, Joey has a different version of theme, I want to discuss it. Then I go back to my small group and I ask them, what did you find? What were you able to see? And that's all you're doing is you're guiding small group. The goal here, and I'm going to put it on my small group, is to scaffold questions so my students can figure out what theme is without me telling them. And you will notice in small group, out of all the years I taught, you're going to have students who are just not very confident. And so they're going to be scared to share their viewpoint on how to find theme. So you want to be really encouraging. Susie, I see you want to say something. It's okay, right? One way we learn is by making mistakes. So if you're wrong, you're wrong. And a lot of times they're not wrong and they actually know what theme is. So they might say, oh, I thought theme was you need to put friendship first. And then the other students will be like, oh yeah, I saw that too. You want them discussing, you want them working together, right? So I'm just kind of there as a scaffold to support their learning, but I am not going to do it again for them because again, we want them to be independent. Okay, so we found in my small group, we found theme, maybe my timer's still going and I'm like, okay, let's kind of discuss some other ideas of theme, or my timer goes off. So then what we do after the lesson is we meet back together and we review theme. So at this time, I will actually have a student bring their graphic organizer up to the desk and they're going to show what they came up with for theme for the rest of the class, okay? And so I may have students doing different themes because again, there can be more than one theme in a story, and they're going to just walk the students through theme. And then my students, of course, can ask questions of like, oh, how did you find what the character learned, or whatever they put, okay? So another question you might think, do they have to do text evidence? If I taught text evidence and I want to include that, I can, but really for me, I just want them to find theme. So next week how my reading curriculum was set up is you learn theme and then you kind of get more into it the next week, then I might add in another skill. But when you're first learning one skill, just stick to that one skill. Don't try to overload them. If you're just teaching theme, just teach theme. Obviously, they still need complete sentences and all that good stuff, right? But yes, I just want to focus on the skill of theme. So now I have reviewed theme with my class. They have showed their graphic organizer, and this time I might tell them to turn it in to the bin, and I may not grade it, but I may just look over it. Then they are going to do their formative assessment. So this is where they have a text and the same exact graphic organizer. One way to differentiate this is if your students still need that scaffolding skill of having a graphic organizer, you can let them use that graphic organizer. If they don't need that skill of a graphic organizer, you can always just have them say on a piece of paper, you're going to write the theme in the story of blah, blah is blah. Okay, because again, the skill is theme and not necessarily how to fill out the graphic organizer. The graphic organizer is the building blocks to understand theme, but is not the main source of always knowing what theme is, if that makes sense. So my graphic organizer, that's their choice. So that's how I'm going to differentiate. If they are level 3, meaning they understand the lesson and they just want to jump in and write what theme is, then let them write what theme is. All right, and then that's the end of that. They're going to turn in that formative assessment and I am going to grade it. If half my class did not understand theme, I am probably going to review that the next day. Then for my lesson plan the following day, I may not have them work again with partners. I may model the skill again one more time and then they jump in to the assignment and they do it by themselves, so that I'm always building on to it as they practice. And then at the very end, my notes and feedbacks. So the next day or the end of the day, I'm going to come back and write what I saw. I might say the text that I chose to model theme, I didn't like. It was actually kind of confusing. So the next go around, now that I have this in my binder, I can decide, oh yeah, I don't want to use that text next year. Or I noticed that students had a really hard time with problem. I probably want to go back and review problem next week sometime. Even for my formal observations, notes and feedback that I was giving for myself was a really important aspect of that formal observation. As well as a teacher, we're always learning and growing. So it's okay if a lesson was just not good. So I want to write feedback of how I can do it differently next time. So, notes and feedback is your next step. You will also notice I do not have date on here because there are many times I'd go to write the date and guess what happened? I didn't teach it that day. We had a fire drill, half my class was missing. So I personally don't write a date. I just have it ready for me when I am ready to teach that lesson. And another thing, if you are reviewing the lesson again, and let's say you do have a formal observation, there's no date. So there's nothing wrong with reviewing with your students. Review is great. So I can use the same exact lesson plan to review. And that's it. That is my whole thought process of how I lesson plan using a lesson plan. So hopefully this helps you because again, this took me maybe, once I get ready and going with this maybe takes me 10 minutes. And then most of my time is just printing the graphic organizer and making the anchor chart and then anything for the reading journals. So it's not so much my lesson plan is taking the longest, it's just getting ready to teach the lesson that should take more of my time. Because the hardest part I found my first couple years is I'm lesson planning, but I don't even know what the text is. I don't even know what book we're reading. I don't have time to get into the text, and that's not helpful. So my goal is to quickly lesson plan, but my biggest goal is to actually get in that text and know how to teach it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give a like and subscribe to my channel. And hopefully this is really helpful because I wish somebody would have sat down with me at the beginning and kind of just went quickly through this thought process of how to lesson plan. I promise you it should not be overwhelming and you should not be spending 2 hours lesson planning. That's not helpful for anybody. Well, thank you so much for being a part of my video today. I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.